Dawn breaks over a mountain lake. Mist hovers above the water's surface, creating a boundary between worlds, what is seen and what remains hidden. The water sits perfectly still, a mirror reflecting the sky so precisely that reality seems doubled, indistinguishable. Mountains and clouds exist both above and below in perfect symmetry. The silence feels ancient, undisturbed. A hand enters the frame. Time slows as it breaks the water's surface. The perfect mirror shatters. Ripples spread outward in concentric circles, distorting all reflections. The mountains tremble. The clouds fracture. What was solid becomes fluid. What was certain becomes questionable. A voice speaks barely above a whisper. What if everything you've been taught about power is wrong? The ripples continue outward, transforming the familiar into the strange. The scene shifts to a corporate boardroom high above a city. Two men in tailored suits shake hands, smiling for a photographer. The camera lingers as the flash captures their expressions. Then we stay, watching a moment longer than comfort allows. The smiles remain fixed, but something shifts in their ease of calculation, an assessment. Their hands gripped with precisely calibrated pressure, neither too weak to suggest vulnerability, nor too strong to signal aggression. Everything measured, everything considered. Neither man is aware of this dance. It happens beneath consciousness. In the ancient limbric regions, where power and survival have always been negotiated, the scene dissolves to a family dinner. Laughter, warmth, the clinking of glasses. A father carves a turkey, distributing portions to eager plates. A mother pours wine. Children talk over each other, vying for attention. Again, the camera stays, observing beyond the comfortable moment. The father's position at the head of the table, the subtle deference and postures around him. The daughter, who laughs too loudly at his joke. The wife who touches his arm, affection layered with a silent request for approval. None of this is spoken. None is acknowledged. Yet it shapes every interaction, invisible as gravity. We move to a courtroom. A judge enters. Everyone rises in unison. Automatic response to hierarchical symbols. Black robes, elevated bench, the formal language of power. After the proceedings, two attorneys who battled fiercely inside now laugh together in the hallway, slipping between worlds of conflict and collegiality with practiced ease. We craft elaborate myths about respect, love, and cooperation. The voice continues. Yet beneath these comfortable illusions lies a truth we refuse to name. The scene returns to the pond. The ripples have begun to settle. As the water calms, we expect to see our own reflection, returning the world restored to its comforting symmetry. Instead, another face emerges from the depths. A man with knowing eyes and a slight enigmatic smile. His features belong to another time, Renaissance Florence, the birthplace of our modern understanding of power.
Machiavelli
Gazes up at us across 5 centuries, his eyes meeting ours with uncomfortable intimacy. It is better to be feared than loved, he whispers, if you cannot be both. The words hang in the air like a challenge, disturbing our moral comfort. Clouds pass overhead, casting shadows across the water's surface. Machiavelli's reflection fragments reforms, fragments again as if time itself cannot contain him. His presence feels both ancient and immediate, like a truth that has always existed beneath our conscious awareness. We have been taught to see Machiavelli as cynical, as corrupted, the voice reflects. But what if he was merely honest? What if he simply had the courage to name what others pretend not to see? The scene shifts to a crowded city street. Hundreds of people move through their daily patterns, each believing themselves autonomous, independent. But viewed from above, they move like schools of fish, synchronizing unconsciously, keeping precise distances, responding to invisible signals. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, our deep, often unacknowledged need to belong, to conform, to avoid standing alone before the abyss. We fear being cast out more than we fear surrendering our uniqueness. A montage of subtle dominance displays in everyday life. A CEO who never fully turns to address the lowest-ranking person in the room. A professor who makes students wait while finishing notes. Establishing temporal control. A parent whose disappointed sigh shapes a child's behavior more effectively than any punishment. Friends whose jokes carry subtle rankings, determining who may laugh at whom. Each interaction contains invisible hierarchies, power gradients, that shape behavior without conscious recognition. Each reveals the same truth. Respect is inseparable from the shadow of fear. Carl Jung understood that what we refuse to see in ourselves does not disappear. It becomes our shadow, growing more powerful, more controlling, the more we deny its existence. Our collective denial of fear's role in human relations has not eliminated it, but merely driven it underground, where it works unseen. The shadow is not evil, the voice observes. To acknowledge the shadow is the beginning of integration, of wholeness. To deny it is to remain forever incomplete, forever unaware. Alan Watts might say we suffer from a form of collective hypnosis and agreement, to pretend that our interactions are based purely on mutual recognition, respect, and love, when in fact they contain complex calculations of advantage, position, and consequence. The illusion comforts us. The reality frightens us. And so we choose the dream. The water of the pond is now completely still again. Machiavelli's face has disappeared. We see only our own reflection, but somehow altered, as if we're seeing ourselves clearly for the first time. This is not a journey into cynicism, the voice assures us. It's a descent into clarity. For only by understanding the true nature of fear and power can we build something authentic, something honest between ourselves. The camera pulls back, revealing the pond as merely one small mirror in a vast landscape. Mountains loom in the distance. Clouds gather. Storm approaches, not with destruction, but with the promise of cleansing. We stand at the edge of a question, the voice concludes. Can we face what truly exists between us? Can we acknowledge the fear that shapes us, the power that moves through us? Or will we continue to embrace comforting illusions, never quite understanding why our connections feel hollow, our respect superficial, our society fragile? The stone that broke the water's surface lies visible now at the bottom of the pond, small, ordinary, yet powerful enough to shatter reflections and reveal what lies beneath. Be feared not as the tyrant is feared, but as truth itself is feared. For in that fear lies the beginning of wisdom. We move through a city at dawn. Morning commuters emerge from subway stations and bus terminals, faces blank, movements synchronized. A collective sleepwalking through steel and glass cathedrals of commerce. Thousands of individuals, yet they move with unconscious coordination, like cells in a single organism. These are the inheritors of a grand illusion, that human relationships stand primarily on mutual respect, cooperation, and goodwill. A comfortable myth we've told ourselves for centuries. The morning ritual continues, badges scanned, elevators ascended. Greetings exchanged with practiced smiles that never quite reach the eyes. A choreography of politeness with steps learned so long ago that no one remembers learning them. What we witness is not connection, but performance, each person playing their assigned role in an unacknowledged theater. We cut between scenes of apparent social harmony, a workplace brainstorming session where colleagues build on each other's ideas, a family celebration where generations gather in seeming unity. The surface appears untroubled, smooth, reassuring, but the eye that sees beneath surfaces tells a different story. Jung spoke of the collective shadow, those aspects of human nature a society collectively agrees not to see. What greater shadow exists than the role of fear in structuring our most cherished connections? What we refuse to acknowledge continues to shape us, but from below consciousness, where its power grows unchecked. Look more carefully at the workplace collaboration. Notice how ideas are weighed not by merit alone, but by who proposes them. See how certain voices dominate while others recede. Feel the calculation behind each contribution. Will this advance me or diminish me in the eyes of those with power? In the community garden, territories are subtly marked. Praise and criticism flow along invisible hierarchies. The appearance of equality masks the reality of influence. Some suggestions take root immediately. Others, though identical in content, wither when spoken from different lips. Even in the family gathering, watch for the undercurrents. Who speaks and who listens? Whose stories are interrupted and whose command complete attention? Constant, unconscious negotiation of position happens beneath the surface of warmth and belonging. This is not cynicism. It is an invitation to clarity. We have buried our understanding of fear as fundamental role in human relations so deeply that we no longer recognize its shape. What we call respect often hides a primal calculation. Who has power? What might they do with it? How must I position myself in response? The sequence culminates in a montage of subtle power dynamics playing out in everyday situations. A boss casually requests weekend work. Watch the subordinates face the momentary calculation before smiling and agreeing. Not enthusiasm, but assessment of risk. A parent expresses disappointment rather than anger. See how much more effectively this controls the child's behavior than any punishment could. The withdrawal of approval cuts deeper than any raised voice. Friends gather, laughing, but observe the rapid checking of reactions after each comment. The subtle competition for attention, the momentary hesitations before speaking to assess social risk. These aren't anomalies or corruptions of human connection. They are revelations of its underlying architecture, the foundation upon which our elaborate social structures rest. Arthur Schopenhauer's insights emerge not as cynical observations, but as whispered truths we all recognize yet refuse to acknowledge. The will to power flows through human relationships like an underground river unseen, but essential. Shaping the landscape above. Turn away from this knowledge, not because it isn't true, but because it disturbs our preferred self-image. We want to believe we have transcended our animal nature completely, that our social bonds are built purely on higher virtues. The desire for this belief itself reveals its fragility. Alan Watts understood that we live in a form of collective hypnosis, agreeing together to pretend we are not what we are. We have convinced ourselves that we have transcended the primal negotiations of social mammals, that our connections are built solely on higher virtues. And yet our bodies know the truth. Feel the tension that enters a room when someone with authority arrives. Notice the subtle adjustments in posture, in voice, in attention. These responses occur below thought, in regions of the nervous system far older than our conscious minds. This is not cause for despair, but for awakening. Nietzsche spoke of the abyss, that vertiginous moment when we look beyond comfortable illusions into reality. The initial terror gives way to possibility. Only by seeing clearly can we begin to choose consciously. Friedrich Nietzsche saw the herd instinct not merely as conformity, but as a complex psychological defense protection. From the terror of standing alone before the vastness of existence, the herd feels safe precisely because it distributes fear, makes it manageable through collective behavior. Yet something in us knows this safety is purchased at the price of authenticity. The Bermensch that Nietzsche envisioned was not a tyrant, but one who could bear the weight of seeing clearly, who could acknowledge the role of power without being consumed by it or denying it. Kierkegaard understood that facing such paradoxes, being simultaneously social creatures and autonomous beings, creates a necessary despair. This despair becomes the gateway to a more authentic existence. The solitude that Schopenhauer valued offers us glimpses of what lies beyond our social performances, moments when alone we need not calculate our effect on others. In silence, something essential can be heard. We return to the city streets, now at midday. The same commuters move through lunch routines, digital devices connecting them to invisible hierarchies, even while physically present with others. Their faces reflect the subtle anxiety of constant assessment, constant positioning. The section closes on a question that hangs in the air like a challenge. What if fear controlled, channeled, and often disguises not a corruption of human connection, but its very foundation? This is not the end of the inquiry, but its beginning. For only by acknowledging what is, can we begin to imagine what might be. Twilight descends on a modern cityscape. Glass towers capture the day's final light, their reflections fragmenting across countless surfaces. Within these reflections, a figure moves anachronistic, dressed in Renaissance attire, visible only in these indirect glimpses. Machiavelli walks unseen among us, his phantom presence echoing through time. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, too few to come in touch with you. We follow suited executives through marble lobbies, their practiced smiles masking calculations that remain unchanged across 5 centuries. The camera lingers on handshakes, capturing the momentary assessment in each person's eyes, measuring worth, gauging advantage, evaluating threat. These are not corruptions of human connection, but its essential architecture, stripped of pretense. A political rally unfolds. The candidate's face fills massive screens as the crowd responds with programmed enthusiasm. Watch closely as the speaker's expression shifts microscopically between rehearsed emotional states, concern, determination, optimism, each transition imperceptible yet perfectly timed. This is not deception, but virtuosity in the oldest human art. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. In a playground, children instinctively organize themselves into hierarchies. A young girl cries theatrical tears until she receives what she wants, then immediately ceases, shooting a triumphant glance at her companion. We are not taught these strategies. We discover them, like learning to breathe. The ghostly Machiavelli pauses before a social media influencer's elaborate setup rings of light. Multiple devices capturing the same spontaneous moment repeatedly until perfection is achieved. The influencer reviews footage, selecting the version where authenticity appears most convincing. The ghost smiles in recognition. Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. Friedrich Nietzsche emerges from shadow, joining Machiavelli at a corporate boardroom table where decisions affecting thousands are made with clinical detachment. The two philosophers, one cast as villain, one as hero in the popular imagination, find common ground in their unflinching assessment of human nature. I call Christianity the one great curse, the one great intrinsic depravity, Nietzsche's voice intones, the one great instinct of revenge, for which no means are venomous enough. Yet we see that his critique was not of compassion itself, but of its instrumentalization, the transformation of virtue into currency. The camera moves through a charity gala, where philanthropy and status-seeking become indistinguishable, where giving becomes a form of taking. Schopenhauer joins them, his eyes registering both despair and clarity. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, he observes as we witness the private moments of public figures. A politician who performed empathy brilliantly on stage sits alone, face emptied of expression, momentarily free from the exhaustion of performance. The discovery of truth is prevented most effectively by preconceived opinion and prejudice. In quiet rooms where real power resides, we observe how those who most loudly reject Machiavelli's insights most faithfully execute his strategies. The moral crusader manipulates through righteousness. The anti-authoritarian creates new hierarchies. Those claiming transcendence of power dynamics merely disguise their mastery of them. Kierkegaard appears in reflection, walking backward through crowded streets, his gaze fixed on what others refuse to see. There are two ways to be fooled, he tells us. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. We move through a series of mirror installations, where each viewer sees themselves reflected differently, some inflated into grandeur, others diminished to insignificance. Believes their reflection is true. None questions the mirror itself. A young executive studies the Prince secretly, hiding its cover behind a contemporary leadership book. Her eyes move between the Renaissance text and the modern office landscape, recognizing patterns unchanged by centuries. Not corruption, continuation. Alan Watts sits cross-legged in the center of a trading floor, unnoticed by the frantic activity surrounding him. We seldom realize that our most private thoughts and emotions are not actually our own, he observes. For we think in terms of languages and images which we did not invent, but which were given to us by our society. The camera pulls back to reveal the vast web of influence flowing through seemingly individual decisions, cultural assumptions, historical momentum, biological imperatives, all shaping choices that feel autonomous but follow ancient patterns. Machiavelli stands at the edge of a vast abyss that Nietzsche described, that vertiginous space where comfortable illusions fall away. If thou gaze long into an abyss, the abyss will also gaze into thee. Those who have looked unflinchingly into human nature emerge either broken or clarified. Men will not look at things as they really are, but as they wish them to be, and a ruined Machiavelli observes as we move through the aftermath of collapsed institutions, failed states, broken relationships, built on foundations of wishful thinking rather than clear assessment. Jung appears beside a reflecting pool, watching as people pass by, each followed by a shadow they never turn to acknowledge. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The shadows grow longer as the sun sets, eventually engulfing their owners. We return to the cityscape as night falls completely. Machiavelli's reflection merges with our own in the darkened glass. His insights were not prescription, but diagnoses, not instructions for tyranny, but observations of the human condition stripped of comforting mythology. The most dangerous wielders of power are not those who acknowledge its nature, but those who deny it while exercising it, who clothe dominance in righteousness, who present calculation as compassion. The prince's mirror reflects not what we wish to see, but what truly exists in the space between human hearts. Its clarity may disturb, but the alternative is to stumble blindly through dynamics we refuse to name, yet cannot escape. As dawn breaks over the city, Machiavelli's ghost dissolves into morning light. His final whisper remains. Truth, however uncomfortable, is kinder than comforting delusion. The mirror, once faced, becomes a window. A slow, floating aerial shot of a city at dawn. Mist clings to skyscrapers. The camera descends gradually toward the urban landscape, revealing structures standing like sentinels across time. The structures we build have always been more than shelter. They are embodiments of our psychology, physical manifestations of invisible hierarchies, silent teachers of our place in the world. The camera glides toward an imposing courthouse. Classical columns rise like rigid sentries. Wide steps force visitors to ascend, to climb toward judgment. Inside, high ceilings create cavernous space above human figures made small by design. These are not neutral spaces. They are carefully orchestrated theaters of power. The courthouse does not simply house justice, it performs it. The ascending steps, the towering facade, the echo of footsteps in marble halls. Each element is calculated to induce a specific emotional state. We enter already humbled, already prepared to submit. Kierkegaard understood this when he wrote of fear and trembling, that necessary awe that creates meaning and hierarchy within human experience. This is not the crude fear of immediate violence. It is something more refined, more pervasive, the fear of judgment, of exclusion, of falling from grace. The fear of meaninglessness itself. The scene shifts to a corporate headquarters. Glass and steel reach skyward. Inside, security checkpoints filter humanity. Executives occupy the highest floors, looking down upon the city like modern gods. The architecture of awe has evolved, but its function remains. Corporate towers are our contemporary cathedrals, their glass facades reflecting clouds while concealing the power within. The employee badge, the security checkpoint, the ascending elevator with floors requiring special access, these are not simply practical measures. They are rituals of hierarchy, constant reminders of one's position in an invisible order. Cut to split-screen images. On one side, ancient tribal initiations, with young people facing tests of endurance. On the other, corporate onboarding sessions with new employees in matching attire, receiving branded materials. The parallels are striking once we have eyes to see them. The tribal initiation and the corporate onboarding serve identical psychological functions. To mark transition, to ensure compliance, to create belonging through shared discomfort. Both say, to be one of us, you must first demonstrate submission to our ways. Jung might observe that these institutions engage our collective shadow, our unacknowledged need for order, hierarchy, and submission. The persona we present to the world may speak of independence and equality, but the shadow knows the comfort of knowing one's place, the relief of surrendered autonomy. The camera moves through a cathedral. Light filters through stained glass, casting colored shadows across kneeling figures. The ceiling soars impossibly high, drawing the eye upward. Religious structures were perhaps the first to perfect this science of awe. The cathedral's vastness is not arbitrary, it physically manifests the smallness of the individual before the divine. The height pulls our gaze upward, training us in the attitude of supplication. Here the message is embedded in stone and light. You are tiny, contingent, temporary. What stands above you is eternal. Schopenhauer, walking alone through the echoing halls of such places, recognized their dual purpose, to comfort and to subjugate. The same architecture that shelters also dominates. It's the same space that offers community, demands compliance. In such structures, solitude becomes isolation, dissent becomes sacrilege. Cut between a religious confession booth and a corporate performance review. In both, an individual sits before authority, explaining themselves, seeking absolution. The confessional and the annual reviews, separated by centuries yet united in function. Both ritualize judgment. Both position the individual as answerable to higher authority. Both promise redemption through admission of inadequacy.
Out.
The psychological architecture remains intact across time. The scene transitions to a presidential motorcade moving through crowded streets, then dissolves to historical footage of royal processions. The visual parallel is unmistakable. Nietzsche would recognize in these displays the manifestation of what he called the will to power. Not simply the desire to dominate others, but the organization of society into hierarchies that appear natural, inevitable. The presidential motorcade, like the royal procession before it, does not simply transport a leader, it stages power. The crowd is positioned as spectator, as subject, as the mass from which the individual leader rises distinct. The herd, as Nietzsche called it, finds comfort in these displays. They affirm order, they promise protection. They convert the chaos of existence into comprehensible theater. The camera moves through a modern airport security checkpoint. People remove shoes, empty pockets, stand with arms raised in scanning machines. Even our movements through space have become choreographed submissions. The airport security line is not simply a practical response to danger, it is a ritual of obedience, a physical reminder that we move through the world on conditional terms. Our bodies are not our own. They are objects to be examined, approved, permitted passage. A sequence of office cubicles stretches toward a vanishing point, uniform and anonymous. The architecture of On need not always soar dramatically upward. Sometimes it subdivides and standardizes, creating the quiet dread of insignificance. The cubicle farm whispers rather than shouts its message. You are replaceable, interchangeable, one among many. Alan Watts would observe how these structures become invisible to us not because they are hidden, but because they are everywhere. They become the water we swim in rather than see. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself, Watts said. Yet how rarely we perceive the psychological architecture that shapes our perception itself. The camera pulls back to reveal people moving through these various spaces: courthouse, corporate tower, church, security checkpoint, with expressions of unconscious deference. We've built elaborate systems of controlled fear while telling ourselves stories about equality, meritocracy, and mutual respect. We speak of democracy while bowing before judicial robes. We claim autonomy while seeking approval from managers. We assert individuality while conforming to institutional demands. This is Kierkegaard's paradox of existence. We can only build meaning through submission to something beyond ourselves. Yet this very submission threatens the self we hope to realize. We need the architecture of awe, even as we resist it. Final sequence. A solitary figure stands in a vast, empty plaza between towering institutional buildings. They look up, then straight ahead, then begin walking with deliberate steps. The abyss, Nietzsche described, is not just the terror of meaninglessness, it is also the vertigo of freedom. To recognize the architecture of awe is to stand momentarily outside it, to see the structures that have shaped us. This recognition brings its own trembling, its own fear. Our denial of fear's central role makes us more susceptible to its influence, not less. We claim to have outgrown reverence while building ever more sophisticated theaters of submission. Only by acknowledging the architecture of awe can we begin to navigate it consciously. The structures remain, the columns still rise, the corridors still narrow. But perhaps in seeing them clearly, we might walk through them differently, neither in blind obedience nor futile rebellion, but with the watchful eye of one who knows. These buildings are mirrors, reflecting not just power's face, but the contours of our own deep longing to be awed. A candle burns with brilliant warmth. As the camera slowly pulls back, we see the flame flicker, struggle against a growing wind, and finally extinguish, leaving only smoke curling into darkness. In our collective imagination, love stands as the highest virtue, the ultimate solution to human conflict. We dream of worlds built on pure compassion, relationships sustained by goodwill alone, power structures maintained through mutual affection rather than fear. Ancient ruins appear through morning mist. Once mighty columns lie broken. Temples to idealism stand roofless against a pale sky, yet history tells a more complex story. The ruins of civilizations built on noble intentions litter our past, not because love itself is flawed, but because love alone provides insufficient foundation for the weight of human nature. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. His insight wasn't that love has no place in human affairs, but that love without consequence creates dangerous imbalance, establishes asymmetrical relationships where one party may exploit the other's commitment with impunity. The scene shifts to a business partnership. Two friends shake hands, eyes bright with trust and vision. Time-lapse shows one partner working tirelessly, while the other gradually takes more and ignores responsibilities. The hardworking partner continues giving, believing in their shared dream, until exhaustion etches lines in their face. This pattern repeats across human experience. The business partner who contributes nothing yet shares in profits. It's the romantic relationship where devotion becomes one-sided. The political alliance where idealism is weaponized by pragmatists. Nietzsche observed this dynamic through his concept of the herd instinct. The collective thrives on fairness, on mutual exchange. Yet it also contains those who would exploit selflessness in others, while offering nothing in return. The herd, sensing this imbalance, grows restless. Trust erodes, and what was built on pure goodwill begins to fracture. In a stark white room, a person stands before a mirror. As they stare at their reflection, the mirror image begins to change, revealing a shadow self-darker, more assertive, protective. The person reaches toward this reflection, but pulls back, afraid. Jung would recognize this hesitation. This concept of the shadow, those parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, helps explain our reluctance to balance love with power. We fear our capacity for judgment, for boundary setting, for measured consequence. We worry that embracing these qualities means betraying our higher nature. But integration, not rejection, was Jung's prescription. Wholeness comes not from denying the shadow, but from incorporating its strengths while tempering its excesses. The camera captures a series of eyes in close-up, first soft with complete trust, then gradually clouding with disappointment, finally hardening with resolution. Schopenhauer's analysis of suffering speaks directly to this progression. Human beings, he observed, consistently fail to meet pure ideals. We are creatures of will and desire, driven by needs that often override our nobler intentions. The suffering this creates isn't incidental, but fundamental to existence. The disappointment in eyes that trusted completely. The gradual hardening of hearts once open without reservation, these are, in tragic exceptions, but predictable. Outcomes when love operates without counterbalance. Parent guides a child's hand away from fire. The child resists, then cries, then accepts. The parent remains steady, neither angry nor yielding. Love shapes the boundary. What appears as strictness here is actually protection. What feels like limitation serves growth. The parent who never says no, who places no boundaries around a child's behavior, is an offering pure love, but abdication. True care includes the courage to disappoint temporarily for the sake of lasting well-being. Kierkegaard understood this paradox that love sometimes manifests as apparent opposition to immediate desires. His concept of despair points to the emptiness of unchallenged existence, the meaninglessness of unlimited freedom. We need resistance to develop substance. We need boundaries to discover ourselves. The scene shifts to a vast, empty plaza. A solitary figure walks slowly through it, their footsteps echoing. The void around them represents absolute freedom, yet their expression shows not joy but existential anxiety. This is the abyss. Nietzsche described the vertigo of too much freedom, too little structure. Without constraints, without consequences for actions, human beings don't flourish, they dissolve. The Bremen he envisioned was free from all limitation, but was instead capable of creating meaningful values within necessary constraints. Two leaders stand before their communities. One promises only comfort, approval, endless accommodation. The other offers challenge alongside support, consequences alongside opportunity. Time-lapse shows the first community gradually fragmenting, while the second grows more cohesive. Alan Watts often spoke of life as a dance between opposing forces, not the triumph of one over another. The illusion, he suggested, lies in believing we can have light without shadow, pleasure without pain, love without limits. The ego demands this impossibility. Wisdom accepts the necessary tension. A wave crashes against rocks. The water is not stopped, but shaped, finding new paths forward. The rock is not cruel, it simply exists, offering necessary resistance. This image captures what balanced power looks like, not opposition to life's flow, but shaping influence. not dominance but direction, not control but consequence. The camera moves through scenes of relationships where love and strength exist in dialogue. A friendship where difficult truth is spoken alongside affirmation. A community where inclusion comes with mutual responsibility. A mentor whose highest respect for a student manifests as rigorous standards. These relationships succeed not because fear dominates, but because it exists in measured dialogue with affection. Not the fear of arbitrary punishment, but the healthy recognition that actions have consequences, that boundaries matter, that responsibility is real. Shadows and light play across a landscape as clouds pass overhead, neither dominates for long. Their dance creates the texture of the day. Jung's vision of individuation, the integration of all aspects of self, offers a path forward. Not rejecting love, but understanding its necessary partnership, with boundaries, with consequences, with elements of protective fear. Not pure light or pure shadow, but the wisdom to embrace both. The final image. Two hands clasped firmly. It's not the loose, naive grasp of initial infatuation, nor the controlling grip of domination. A balanced hold secure enough to provide stability, gentle enough to allow growth. This is love matured through wisdom. This is power tempered by compassion. This is the necessary balance that sustains what pure idealism alone cannot. Not the rejection of love, but its evolution into something both stronger and more tender, a foundation that can bear the full weight of our humanity. A forest at dawn. Mist hovers between trees. A martial arts master moves through ancient forms, edge gesture, precisely controlled, power held in perfect restraint. The movements suggest immense capability channeled through discipline. Respect, in its deepest form, carries a curious paradox. It emerges not from affection alone, nor from terror, but from the recognition of contained strength, power acknowledged, yet restrained. A capacity for consequence held in wise suspension. The scene shifts to a courtroom. The judge listens intently, expression neutral but attentive. When she speaks, her voice is measured. Her gavel rests nearby, a symbol of authority rarely used but always present. Those who command authentic respect inhabit this narrow passage between weakness and tyranny. The judge's power lies not in harsh punishment, but in the calibrated response that, understanding that consequences exist but will be administered with discernment. We trust not because we are forced to, but because we recognize wisdom guiding strength. A parent sets a boundary with a child. The child tests, pushes back. The parent remains steady, neither harsh nor yielding. Their eyes communicate both love and resolve. Here we witness the architecture of secure attachment. A parent whose no creates not fear but safety. The boundary that doesn't oppress but protects. The child learns a fundamental truth. Power wielded with love becomes not domination but shelter. Nietzsche's concept of will to power is often misunderstood as mere domination, the crude exercise of strength over others. But its deeper meaning reveals itself in these moments of integrated authority. The will to power manifests not as tyranny, but as the capacity to hold space for consequences, to maintain order through presence rather than force. The camera follows a symphony conductor. Subtle gestures, they shape massive sound, bringing forth thunderous crescendos and delicate whispers. Musicians watch attentively, responding to the slightest movement. What we witness is not the absence of power, but its refinement. The conductor doesn't demand attention, they command it through competence. The musicians follow not from fear of punishment, but from recognition of mastery. Their respect emerges from the conductor's ability to affect their collective creation, for better or worse, while trusting in their wisdom to shape it beautifully. Close-up of hands. One holding a scalpel, poised above flesh. A surgeon's eyes focused, present, carrying the weight of consequence. Few symbols better capture respected strength than the surgeon's knife. It cuts not to destroy, but to heal. Its edge represents both danger and salvation. We surrender to its touch, not because we lack choice, but because we recognize its purpose. The surgeon embodies Jung's integrated shadow, not denying their capacity to harm, but channeling it toward healing. The shadow in Jung's conception contains our disowned capacities, including the power to affect others, to create consequences, to stand firm against opposition. Those most respected are not those who deny these capacities, but who acknowledge control and purpose them.
Access.
Appropriate force when necessary while restraining it when not. A thunderstorm rolls across fertile fields. Lightning flashes, rain pours down. Rather than destroying, it nourishes. The controlled violence of nature becomes life-giving. This visual metaphor captures the essence of the respected shadow, the domestication of something fearsome into something beneficial. Not by denying its nature, but by channeling it purposefully. The storm doesn't pretend to be gentle. It remains powerful, yet serves life rather than death. Schopenhauer understood that suffering is inevitably a fundamental condition of existence. Yet he also recognized that suffering given meaning becomes endurable, even valuable. The respected leader doesn't promise absence of pain, but gives purpose to necessary hardship. Their strength lies not in eliminating difficulty, but in making it meaningful. An apprentice watches a master craftsman reject inferior work. The master's standards are exacting, their judgment clear. Yet their criticism comes not from cruelty, but from commitment to excellence. In this interaction, we see respect forming. The apprentice doesn't resent the master's judgment, but values it, recognizing that high standards reflect deep care, that the capacity to say not good enough serves growth rather than diminishment.
Ow.
The master's power to evaluate becomes not oppression, but elevation. Kierkegaard wrote of the fear and trembling that accompanies authentic spiritual development. This isn't the fear of punishment, but the awe that comes from encountering something greater than oneself. The respected mentor evokes this response, not through intimidation, but through embodied wisdom that challenges us to transcend our limitations. A fire burns within a stone hearth. It remains powerful, yet contained. It warms rather than consumes. As people gather around it, faces illuminated in its glow. The hearth fire represents another facet of the respected shadow dangerous potential, rendered beneficial through wise containment. The fire doesn't pretend to be cool. It remains hot, capable of harm. Yet properly channeled, its very danger becomes its gift. The scene shifts to a wilderness guide leading others through difficult terrain. They move with quiet confidence, attentive to both the path ahead and those who follow. When they speak, others listen not from obligation, but from earned trust. Alan Watts often spoke of the illusion of the separate self, the ego that believes it stands apart from nature and others. The respected guide transcends this illusion, understanding their interconnection with those they lead. Their authority doesn't inflate the ego, but serves the collective journey. They command respect not to feel important, but to ensure safe passage. In slow motion, a martial arts master and student spar. The master could strike decisively, but chooses perfect control instead. The student, recognizing both the power and its restraint, shows neither fear nor carelessness, but attentive respect. Nietzsche's Berman Schoffen, mischaracterized as domineering, might better be understood through this image. The transcendent individual isn't one who crushes others, but one who masters themselves. Their strength creates not subjugation, but inspiration. Others follow not from weakness, but from recognition of genuine mastery. The camera captures a series of eyes and close-up eyes that have witnessed capability and restraint together. These eyes show neither the dull compliance of the subjugated, nor the wary distance of the merely afraid, but the clear, engaged attention of authentic respect. This is the gaze that meets integrated power, alert, but not anxious, attentive but not subservient. It recognizes the other's capacity for impact without feeling threatened by it. This gaze emerges only when fear exists alongside trust, when we know another could affect us yet believe they will do so wisely. Final sequence, a montage of the respected figures we've seen: the judge, the parent, the conductor, the surgeon, the craftsman, the guide, the martial artist. Each stands in their domain, embodying contained power. As night falls, each becomes partially shadowed, while remaining visible, neither fully illuminated nor fully obscured. This visual metaphor captures Jung's concept of individuation, the integration of shadow and light into wholeness. The most respected among us don't stand in perfect brightness, denying their capacity for judgment or force, nor do they lurk in darkness, wielding power without restraint. They stand at the threshold, acknowledging both their strength and its limits. True respect emerges in this twilight space where we recognize another's shadow, yet trust their mastery of it, where we see not the absence of power, but its purposeful containment, where fear transforms from threat into reassurance, from danger into protection. Not the absence of the shadow, but its respectful integration. A tightrope stretches across a vast canyon. Morning mist swirls below, obscuring the depth. A solitary figure takes the first step onto the wire poised between flight and fall. There exists a narrow passage in human relations, a delicate balance between being feared too much and too little. This is not merely a question of leadership, but of presence itself, how we occupy space in the world and in the hearts of others. The scene splits. On one side, a tyrant pounds his fist on a table guards flanking him, faces around him frozen in terror. On the other, a meek figure speaks to an indifferent crowd, their words evaporating into air unheeded. These are the twin failures of human presence. The tyrant who rules through terror alone, inspiring not loyalty, but the seeds of rebellion. And the ineffectual figure whose lack of consequence renders them irrelevant, ghosts passing through the world, leaving no impression. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. Yet his deeper wisdom lay not in choosing fear over love, but in recognizing the necessary tension between them. The narrow path where measured consequence creates stability without provoking resistance. A physician carefully measures medicine into a dropper. The camera focuses on the liquid, the same substance that in different quantities could heal or harm. This calibration requires exquisite sensitivity. Too much, and the medicine becomes poison. Too little, and the illness continues, unabated. The respect-worthy physician understands this, balance carrying the weight of potential harm while wielding it precisely for healing. Jung would recognize this as shadow integration, the conscious incorporation of our capacity for impact, for consequence, for measured severity. The shadow contains not just our darkness, but our strength, our boundary setting, our capacity to stand firm when necessary. Those who deny this aspect of themselves become either tyrants unconsciously acting out their disowned power, or ineffectual figures unable to affect their world. A parent watches a child climb a tall tree. The parent neither rushes to prevent the ascent, nor turns away in indifference. They remain present, allowing risk while standing ready to prevent disaster. This is perhaps the purest expression of balanced fear, the parent who permits enough danger to foster growth while preventing harm that would end growth altogether. The child climbs higher because two things are simultaneously true. They might fall, and they will not be allowed to destroy themselves. Both awareness of consequence and trust and protection must exist together. The camera captures a series of faces responding to different leadership styles. Blank compliance beneath tyranny. Dismissive indifference toward weakness, and alert engagement with balanced authority. Nietzsche's concept of the herd instinct helps illuminate why neither extreme succeeds. Human beings instinctively resist both domination and irrelevance. We balk at the yoke of terror, finding ways to subvert it, while we simply ignore those who cannot affect our world. The herd follows neither the slaughterer nor the ghost, but the shepherd who combines protection with direction. A vast, empty landscape stretches to the horizon. A solitary figure stands motionless, facing the void. The emptiness itself becomes almost tangible. Schopenhauer's appreciation for solitude reveals another dimension of this balance. The capacity to stand alone to face the void without flinching creates a gravity that draws others rather than repelling them. Not the desperate solitude that begs for attention, or the bitter isolation that rejects connection, but the self-sufficient solitude that engages from wholeness rather than need. A storm approaches over mountains. Time-lapse shows clouds building, darkening, finally breaking in lightning and rain. The land receives this violence as nourishment. Kierkegaard spoke of anxiety as the dizziness of freedom, the vertigo that comes from standing before infinite possibility. Without consequences, choice becomes meaningless. Without stakes, engagement fades. The approaching storm creates not just fear but anticipation, not just danger but renewal. The fear of falling is what makes the climb exhilarating rather than empty. The scene shifts between contrasting environments. A crisis room during emergency, where a leader gives firm, rapid directives. A family dinner where the same person listens attentively. Vulnerability evident in their expression. Different domains require different calibrations. Leadership in crisis demands displays of strength that would seem excessive in times of peace. Intimacy requires vulnerability that would be inappropriate in public governance. The wisdom lies not in finding a universal formula, but in reading each context, accurately knowing when to be the mountain and when to be the valley. Close dash up of a hand holding sand. Squeeze too tightly, the sand escapes. Held too loosely, it spills away. Held with precise tension, it remains. Alan Watts often spoke of the inseparability of opposites, how apparent contradictions reveal themselves as complementary forces in eternal dance. Fear and love are not opponents, but partners in the creation of respect. Love without the capacity for fear becomes mere sentimentality, while fear without love becomes tyranny. The true master of human relations understands. They exist not in opposition, but in necessary conversation. A master conductor leads an orchestra. At times their movements are forceful, commanding. At others, barely perceptible. The musicians respond not just to the gestures, but to the spaces between them, the held breath before. Resolution, this visual metaphor captures the essence of balanced presence. The conductor doesn't choose between strength and subtlety, but moves fluidly between them, as the music demands. The silence between notes holds as much meaning as the sounds themselves. The musicians follow not from fear alone, nor from mere affection, but from recognition of masterful understanding. The camera moves through a hall of mirrors. A figure walks among the reflections, each showing a different aspect of themselves, some darker, some lighter, as they move. The reflections begin to merge into a single, integrated image. June's concept of individuation illuminates the path forward, not the rejection of our capacity to generate fear or its uncontrolled expression, but its integration into a whole self. The individual who commands genuine respect has not eliminated their shadow, but incorporated it, consciously accessing its strength without being consumed by it. A bonsai tree, carefully pruned over decades. Its beauty emerges not from unfettered growth, nor from brutal cutting, but from disciplined shaping that respects the tree's nature while guiding its form. Nietzsche's Bermensch might be understood through this image, that the tyrant who dominates others. But the individual who has mastered themselves, their strength expresses not as domination, but as cultivation of self and others. They inspire not cowering, but growth, not submission, but aspiration. The tightrope walker continues across the canyon. Each step is precise, focused. The balance pole shifts minutely with each adjustment. The face shows concentration but not panic. The productive anxiety that heightens awareness, rather than clouding it. This is the narrow path between terror and invisibility. It's not the absence of fear, but its purposeful incorporation, not the rejection of love, but its strengthening through boundary. The respected individual generates not paralyzing fear, but clarifying awareness of consequence, creating a space where others can engage fully, alert to meaning rather than numbed by either terror or indifference. Final image. As the tightrope walker reaches the far side, the camera pulls back to reveal that others have begun to follow the same path. The first crosser has not commanded their journey, but inspired it, showing not just that crossing is possible, but that the journey itself holds meaning. This is the ultimate measure of balanced fear. It creates not subjects, but fellow travelers, not followers, but companions. It awakens not servitude, but aspiration. Between the abyss of terror and the void of insignificance lies the path of meaningful connection, where we are neither diminished by another's greatness, nor untouched by their presence. The compassionate prince. The scene opens with dawn light filtering through fog. A pond lies perfectly still, mirroring the sky. A hand enters the frame and gently drops a stone into the water. Ripples spread outward, disrupting the perfect reflection, yet creating their own geometric beauty. We begin where we end, with the recognition that disturbance is not the enemy of harmony, but its necessary companion. The ripples across still water are not destruction, but animation, not chaos, but a new order unfolding. The camera transitions through familiar scenes now viewed with new understanding. A business negotiation where subtle cues of respect and boundary flow beneath cordial words. A family dinner where a parent's firm redirection carries as much love as their embrace. A courtroom where justice balances mercy with necessary consequence. These everyday moments have always contained the delicate interplay of power, fear, love, and respect, to dance previously unseen, but now revealed to our awakened perception. What appeared as separate forces now show themselves as aspects of a single, complex wisdom. Machiavelli understood this when he advised the prince to be both loved and feared when possible. His insight has been misinterpreted as cynical manipulation, but its deeper truth speaks to honest recognition of human nature. The truly wise leader, parent, friend, or partner, understands that healthy fear, the fear of losing connection, respect, or opportunity stabilizes relationships that pure sentiment cannot sustain. A mentor reviews a student's work. Their standards are exacting, their feedback direct, yet their eyes communicate profound belief in the student's potential. The student receives this challenge not with resentment but with determined focus. In this exchange we witness the integration that Jung described in his concept of individuation, the process of psychological maturation that embraces life's inherent contradictions rather than denying them. The mentor embodies this wisdom, understanding that growth requires both support and challenge. Both acceptance and judgment, their high standards communicate both belief in potential and consequence for waste. The scene shifts to a couple in conversation. One partner clearly expresses a boundary. The other initially resists, then pauses, listening more deeply. The moment transforms from potential conflict to deeper understanding. The partner whose boundaries stand firm demonstrates both self-respect and investment in the relationship's health. This is not rejection, but invitation to authentic connection. Schopenhauer, who understood suffering as inherent to existence, would recognize this paradox that accepting necessary pain creates the possibility for deeper joy. That honest limitation creates the foundation for genuine freedom. A vast mountain landscape appears. Clouds cast moving shadows across rugged terrain. The mountain neither resists the darkness nor is diminished by it. It simply endures, embodying both strength and acceptance. Nietzsche's concept of the Bermenschta evolved human who transcends conventional morality finds its truest expression not in domination, but in this mountain-like presence. Not the absence of weakness, but its incorporation into a greater strength. Not escape from darkness, but the capacity to stand firm within it, creating shelter precisely because of unshakable substance. The camera captures a leader in crisis. They listen intently to advisors, face showing the weight of decision. When they finally speak, their voice carries measured, certain to not the bravado that hides doubt, but the clarity that acknowledges difficulty while providing direction. This leader has faced what Nietzsche called the abyss, the void of meaninglessness and uncertainty that threatens to swallow all purpose, yet they have emerged, not hardened by despair, but tempered by it. Their authority stems not from denial of darkness, but from having traversed it consciously. A parent sits with a distraught child. They neither minimize the child's pain, nor become overwhelmed by it. They simply remain present, offering both compassion and strength to harbor in storm. Kierkegaard spoke of inwardness, the deep subjectivity, where authentic existence is found. The parent in this moment exemplifies this quality, drawing not on external rules or appearances, but on inner wisdom. They understand the paradox that true connection comes not from merging identities, but from maintaining the integrity of separate selves in relationship. The scene shifts to a judge delivering a sentence. Their expression carries the burden of necessary severity alongside genuine regret. The focus moves between their face and the face of the defendant, both caught in a moment of difficult truth. Justice without compassion becomes cruelty. Compassion without justice becomes enablement. The judge navigates this narrow passage, embodying what Alan Watts described as the recognition of inseparable opposites understanding. That seeming contradictions often reveal themselves as complementary aspects of a larger truth. A series of mirrors appears in a darkened room. A figure walks between them, each reflection showing a different aspect of their nature, some luminous, some shadowed. As they progress, the reflections begin to merge, creating an image more complex and complete than any individual facet. Jung's concept of the shadow emerges. In this visual metaphor, the disowned aspects of self that must be reclaimed for wholeness. The compassionate prince has not eliminated their capacity for judgment, for consequence, for measured severity. They have incorporated these qualities consciously, accessing their power without being consumed by it. The scene returns to the business negotiation. A leader clearly states what they cannot accept, they require. The boundary is firm but not hostile. The position clear but not rigid. The respect in the room visibly deepens rather than diminishes. This leader understands what Nietzsche observed about the herd instinct, that humans instinctively test boundaries, respect strength, and ultimately seek not domination but right relationship. The clarity they bring is not manipulation, but honesty about human nature. It's allowing for more authentic, effective connections. A doctor delivers difficult news to a patient. They neither sugarcoat the reality nor deliver it without compassion. The truth stands unvarnished, yet held within relationship. Schopenhauer's focus on suffering finds resolution here, not in the elimination of pain, which is impossible, but in its honest acknowledgement. The doctor's integrity creates not greater suffering, but greater dignity. The patient receives not just information, but presents the gift of being fully seen in difficulty rather than abandoned to false comfort. A sequence of hands. One setting a boundary with a raised palm, another offering support with an extended reach, another pointing direction with clarity. Different gestures, same hands. This visual metaphor captures the integration we seek, different expressions of the same fundamental wisdom. The hand that sets limits and the hand that offers help are not in opposition, but in concert. The compassionate prince has not chosen between love and fear, but transcended the apparent contradiction. The scene shifts to sunset over the pond from the opening. Golden light transforms the water. A hand again drops a stone, creating ripples, but now we see these disturbances differently. The camera follows the ripples, expanding circles, revealing how they create new patterns of light and reflection. These ripples are not destruction of harmony, but the necessary tension that creates movement, growth, and true stability. The stone's descent creates not chaos, but transformation water, finding new forms, light dancing in new patterns. What appeared as disruption reveals itself as evolution. Final shot, a mountain reflected. In still water at dusk, the mountain stands solid, while its reflection trembles slightly with the water's movement. Both are real, both are truth, the unshakable and the flowing existing in perfect relationship. Be feared, not as the tyrant who destroys, but as the mountain that remains solid enough to shelter, strong enough to respect, and honest enough to acknowledge the shadow that makes the light meaningful. This is the compassionate prince. It's not absence of power, but it's conscious wielding. Not denial of darkness, but its purposeful integration. Not escape from fear, but its transformation into the foundation of true respect.